who just released his solo album, Last Flight from Home. You might remember him from Styx. We're very lucky to have him. Thanks very much if you just logged on. I know we're having some technical difficulties, but we're going to try to bring Todd on, and then we'll get started. Woo! There we go.
Hey, second time's a
Now I can
charm.
see you. Thanks for your patience. How are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Awesome. It's an absolute honor to speak to you today. Thanks
Oh,
for
well,
your time.
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Where are you coming in from?
I'm coming in from my home studio just outside of Austin, Texas, in the beginning of the hill country on the west side of town. And this is where I've been for, well, since March 13th.
Yeah, I hear that. How many drums do you think you have in there?
I honestly don't know. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 114 snare drums and I think 11 drum sets in here, maybe.
Okay, so that's enough.
Yeah, it's enough to kind of handle any musical situation that might come my way.
Great, you're prepared. Love it.
Yes.
So we have so much to talk about. I really want to hear about your career as a whole in our brief time together today, but I want to start with your current work, your debut solo album, Last Flight Home.
Okay. What would you like to
It's
know?
amazing for starters. I
Thank you.
I really love it. I'm a total fan. It's totally different and totally your own from anything else I've heard from you, which is exciting. It really feels uniquely yours. So it just came out in May. And
Hmm.
what prompted you to do your own thing?
Well, the funny thing is, an old buddy of mine, J.K. Harrison, had been cajoling me and harassing me and haranguing me for a number of years about doing a record with him, and I always blew him off, thinking that, gee, it's cute that you think that I could do that, but thanks, but no thanks. And he just hit me at a particular time where I just played on a couple like instrumental records, so I kind of had that musical itch had been scratched, so to speak. And I had about a week in Los Angeles with some free time, and I thought, well, let's get together and just see what happens. And it was pretty clear right from the get-go that something was happening. It was unfolding very quickly and easily and organically. Uh, and the notion of actually doing my own record as a singer scared the hell out of me. It terrified me. Um, and I thought, that's where I need to be. I need to be in scary, deep terrain, not doing the same thing or playing fusion things and playing drums through kicks and whatnot. I wanted to do something that was along these lines, and I've always been drawn to melody, lyrics, and a good song. So I decided, well, let's see where this goes, and that's how it sort of started.
Wow. Were you also a trained singer at any point?
No, my wife is a brilliant singer, and I've always worked with brilliant singers, which always been fortunate. And it was, like when I sing background with Styx, I feel all I have to do is not screw this up, right? Because they're going to be fine.
Right.
But being able to blend with those guys, and the few numbers that I do, or sometimes I'll sing a little bit, when we're warming up, pre-show. But working with JK, who's such a great singer, I was able to sort of metaphorically stand naked in front of him singing into a microphone and felt comfortable enough for him to make suggestions to take it from okay to good to let's try to do it better than good, and let's try to have it be every line the best that it could be and also the most sincere that it could be. Because as a drummer, I've always been in the supportive role. A singer is the focal point, and to not only sing in tune, to sing in time, to connect emotionally with each lyric and then connect emotionally with all the lyrics, that's a pretty friggin' tough job to do. And I had to learn by doing it because I could tell, and as could JK, if something wasn't right or something wasn't sincere, it stuck out like a sore thumb because the music was on the emotional side of where music can go. So it was very obvious when things weren't right.
How did having your own body of work and stepping into that focal role change how you thought about the drums on this album?
That's a great question because I've always tried to support the song. I've always tried to know and care about the lyrics of every song that I play, because then if you're able to do that, then you could be part of the storytelling process. You know what I mean? If you're playing
Mm-hmm.
drums and all you're doing is thinking it's the verse, let's play soft, and it's the chorus, and now it's time to play loud. If you're thinking the music in those terms, it's sort of it's like math or some sort of music paint by numbers as opposed to really meaning it. But to answer your question, there were certain things I had in my mind that I thought from a drummer's point of view, oh, this might be nice to play this here. It might be a clever bit to do this. And then when it came time to doing the drums, it seemed insincere. When I did that, it seemed drummy. And I simplified a bunch of ideas that I initially had because it helped the greater good, which is the song, instead of, hey, here's a vocal line and it's a little bit of fancy bit back here from the drums, look at me, and back to the singer. You know, I didn't want it to feel like that. I wanted the entire piece of music to seem like, clouds coming in from over the horizon and enveloping you that way, as opposed to tricky bit, tricky bit, tricky bit. Look at this, look at me, look at me, look at me here, and now back to the song. That was the goal.
Right. Interesting. You get that sense from the music video of the title track, the song "Last Flight Home," where you see you on drums, and then that box kind of moves to the side, and you come to focus as the singer. And I thought that was a really neat metaphor for your journey to be at that center point and still keep drums right here. Was that intentional?
I'd have to ask Eric Doris, who sort of edited that video. I think that naturally came just because maybe the drums entered before the before the vocals did, and we needed something to show. Something that I'm kind of tickled about that song in particular is the very first symbol note, the very first note of any sonic information at all was my father's ride cymbal, his last and my first. I learned how to play on that cymbal, and I just happened to use that cymbal because I like the sound of that. Going back with another one that sort of, in my mind, was like the ticking of time. So that very first note was the cymbal I learned how to play on, and the first bass drum was my father's old jazz kit, which is right next to me here.
Wow.
So 50 years later from learning how to play this instrument, those are the first sonic elements to the first song on my first record, and that just was serendipitous, and I'm really tickled that it came out that way.
Seriously. So I do want to talk about your dad and how you got into drumming, but first, just one more thing on Last Flight Home on that song. It was so emotional for me listening to it. I'm the oldest of three sisters. I love my dad very much. And there is so much responsibility in taking care of your family, especially unique for an artist who doesn't have the option to be around as much if that's your career and that's how you're going to provide. So it definitely struck a chord in me, the image of having your dad come in the door, and that's when it's truly time for family dinner or whatever your family
Right.
ritual is. So I can't imagine how your family must have felt hearing this. It's such a beautiful ode to your life with them.
Well, I'm making up for lost time now.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it at the risk of it sounding like, oh, the rock musician is complaining, but I mean, anyone who travels for their job, and believe me, there's business guys in suits that, fly a couple million miles a year more than I do in under normal circumstances. So, for me, the difficult thing was, it seems like I could always fly out to begin a run, no problem. But coming home seemed to be an impossibility for a while there, with a litany of broken planes, inclement weather, missing crew members, and then missing connections. And sometimes I'm only coming home for 3 days. I've been gone for 18 days, and I'm coming home for 3 days. And maybe I'm doing some drum seminars or clinics or master classes. While the rest of the band might have 10 days off, I only have 3. So if I, get stranded in an airport for 6 hours, I'm missing part of a precious one of 3 days that I could spend with my wife and daughter. So that was the impetus of that song. But Yeah, I've never gone this long without stepping on an airplane in in my life, I think. But that's where that song from. And I think anyone who travels for their job or anyone who maybe is on the other end of the way could relate.
Definitely. And that's why it's so surprising to me that you hadn't had more experience singing, because you have this very natural, powerful element of storytelling in your voice. And as you sit with this album, it's, the struggle of you wanting to be home and going away reads, but the music is so good that it emphasizes the point that you have to do this.
Well, thank you. That's a great compliment, and I'll thank you very much. I'll happily take that because that was the intent. You know, that was the intent. So thanks.
It worked.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, with people forced to be home now, and you do get this break, so to speak, you do have a song on the album called An Invitation, which speaks a little bit to a final farewell, which makes me nervous. Does that indicate anything about your career, or can we anticipate a solo tour?
Oh no, no, that song really is sort of a centuries old madrigal, forbidden love that caused the narrator to be condemned and lose his life for a forbidden love. So no, I wouldn't read I wouldn't read if that's any sort of personal farewell. And for anyone that might think that I
Good.
have, by the way, I just have to nip this in the bud right now. Anyone that thinks that I have aspirations of being some sort of grandiose singing personality, that's not it at all. I'm very happy with my job playing drums. I'm comfortable being hidden behind all the wood and metal. I love the guys in my band. I'm not going anywhere. This was just a grand experiment to see that if I could do something that I wasn't certain that I could do, that my dear friend knew that I could do and believed in me the whole time. So yeah, I ain't going anywhere. You're stuck with me.
Okay, good. So glad to hear it. That's awesome. The cover of the album is really cool. It has, I think it's 16 squares. Most of them are in black and white, and they're all of doors with a suitcase in front of them. And then there's that one that's illuminated in color with a blue door.
Mhm.
What can you tell us is behind the blue door?
Well, to me, it represents. Well, first off, my one of my oldest friends, Christopher Marcos, designed the cover. I took the pictures and I had the idea and I sent it
Oh,
to him. I
cool.
said, "Come up with some ideas for this." Um, and so he put that together. To me, that sort of represented 16 days on the road and all the black and white pictures, because that's what it looks like every time I'm about to check out of a hotel. I'll get a sheet under the door and it'll say 3 o'clock bags. And so I have my suitcase ready to go at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock, they come and get my bag, and then I go down and I check out. I get on the bus, go to the gig, play the gig, drive to the next town, check in a hotel at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, time to go. It repeats. So those were all the days on the road, but the one in color, that was the last hotel before I get to fly home.
Ah, okay, very clever. I like that. It's a really neat cover.
Yeah,
That's
no,
very
Christopher Marcos, he's an Emmy-winning director and graphic designer, and one of my oldest friends going back to when we were about 6 or 7 years old. So
cool.
yeah.
Okay, well, great segue. Looking back to the beginning of your childhood, tell me about some of the influences in your life that helped you become a music man.
Well, really, the greatest card that I was dealt in life was being the youngest of a musical family. My father was a drummer and he was a doctor as well. So he practiced, medicine by day and he gigged at night.
Wow.
My mother was an actress who could also sing, dance, and play piano. My two older brothers that are 5 and 7 years older than myself, respectively, played bass and keyboards. So I was in love with the drums ever since I was an infant. And it just made sense to round out the rhythm section because Paul and Joel are playing bass and piano. So I grew up in a rhythm section. We'd go for a swim or throw a ball around, and then we'd come in and we'd work on music. So it was a great way to grow up. We each had our own stereos in our rooms, and there'd be music, different kinds of music coming from different rooms. So it was really a beautiful way to grow up. And it was weird when I'd go to friends' houses And I'd look around, where are your instruments? How can you live like this? What the hell's the matter with you? It was really a great way to grow up. So it was never something that I decided to do. It was always something that I did, and always something that I wanted to do.
So then, given your family background, I assume your parents were quite supportive when you decided to go to college for music.
Yes, it didn't come without some trials and trepidations or whatever, because when I was, by the time I was a sophomore, maybe a junior, I imagined that, well, I'm just going to load up the car with my drums and drive to Los Angeles, and that'll be that. And somewhere in my junior year, I thought, maybe life doesn't quite work like that. Maybe I need to put in some more work and gain more experience before I just pack up the car and,
Mm-hmm.
the day after high school graduation and skip town. So I decided to go to Berklee College of Music. So I had to bring my grades up, because for a while I didn't care about school. I cared all about music. So I had to bring my grades up. I had to work hard, study hard. Went to Berklee for 1 year. My parents had split at that point. There's only money to go for 1 year, because it was wildly expensive then in 1987 money anyway. And then it was sort of just coming back to Chicago and
Wow.
reconnecting the musical acquaintances that I'd made, a lot done through my older brothers, and just trying to be a working musician. I mean, I never wanted to, tar a roof or flip burgers or do anything like that. It always had to be music related, and that's what I strove to do. It was sink or swim, and I had to swim.
It's great because even with that 1 year of training at a university, it's really different from what a lot of musicians get. You hear, I just picked this up and gave it my best shot, and this is what it turned into. And you have that at the roots of your talent, but then you do have this classical element. How do you drift from that to make the drums your own art without falling back on something that's more classical?
Boy, uh, I've always tried to handle my business with 5 easy principles that most people can't put together. One is always be on time. 2, be prepared. 3, show up with the right tools for the job. Number 4, nail the job. And then 5, leave everybody happy that you were there. I felt if I could put those 5 things together, the concentric circles of people and musicians that would finally lead to me being able to support myself in my early 20s, and have my own apartment, type of thing. And it the hard thing is when you're 20 and 21, it seems like this has to happen now or it's never going to happen. And the period from 20 to 27 seems like a lifetime, but it's not. And if you're patient and you're persistent, you hone your talents and you do the right things, you're reliable and your reputation is good. If you're patient, good things are going to float towards you. But if you have this air of desperation that, man, I got to do this, man, I got to do this, then that sort of energy is kind of uncomfortable to be around. And I think the universe makes it a little tougher to grab. Things turn into smoke and aberrations, as opposed to just making sure that you're able to handle whatever's going to come your way, which
And you
takes
had
experience and patience. And
definitely.
some of that experience is getting your ass kicked.
Do you have an example?
Uh, yeah, one time I started playing in this 13-piece Latin salsa samba band. And I was coming from a very fusion perspective and not the real roots of all the different, languages that are tied up in the cultures of these different rhythms. And we're playing a piece of music at this gig, and all of a sudden the 3 percussionists turned around and just gave me the stink eye, like I did something wrong. And I'm looking at them, and these guys are looking at me like they're going to kill me. And on break, they walked off the stage without looking at me or saying a thing. And I walked up to them, proverbial hat in hand, and I said, "Guys, what did I do in that last piece of music? Because you all looked at me like you're going to kill me." And they saw that I wanted to learn, that I was honest and earnest, and they said, "Well, what you did, you turned the clave around from 3/2 to 2/3." And to me, to my gringo American, suburban Chicago ears, I thought that was some cool stuff I was playing. But to them, it was like the record going, and they looked at me and go, "What the hell are you doing? You just wrecked this." But I didn't know. So that, that was an experience. You're going to have some things like that. When I first moved to Los Angeles, there were certain guys that were like, "Oh, dude, call me, man. I can't wait to hire you. You call me the moment you move out here." And then "Hey, I'm here. Hello, hello." That's life in the big city.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have a lot of realistic and prepared expectations, which must help in an uncertain industry.
Yeah, it's a crazy business. So you have to be adaptable and flexible to kind of squirm your way through this weird business that
Nevertheless,
that that constantly seems to change all the time.
right. And nevertheless, you've had a steady gig with the Sticks for 20 some years.
Yes, it's been 24 years. It was like a summer fling that turned into, a big chunk of my life that I never expected to happen. I assumed that when I said goodbye to those guys at the end of that first tour in 1996, that I would never see them again. That's really what I thought was going to happen. But I'm very, very lucky and fortunate to have been cast in with a group of not only guys who play and sing as well as they do, but that are wonderful people as well, and wonderful people in the organization. So I'm very, very thankful for that.
Well, I have to address that today is actually 24 years to the date that the initial drummer of Styx, John Pinozzo, passed away.
Yes.
And I'd really like to get your take on what that transition was like for you and what life after that looked like.
Well, I have a story about this very day 24 years ago. I remember we were in New York City. We were there for a week. We were doing some TV shows. We had a couple gigs, in New Jersey and in New York. And I got woken up by George Packer, our tour manager, saying, "We're meeting in Chuck Panazzo's room in a half hour. John died last night." And so, okay, hung up the phone, got in the shower, and had the meeting. We were all in the room, discussed what was going to happen. If we were going to cancel a show, or I don't even remember what happened. But the crux of the story is I made myself scarce because I thought that I would be a constant reminder that their longtime drummer and literal twin brother to Chuck is no longer there. So I went out. One of my best friends lived just outside the city. So he came in the city, and we went out and went to a couple of restaurants and a couple of bars and walked around New York. And then I came back to the hotel. I'll never forget this as long as I live. I walked in the lobby, and the bar was to the right and the elevators were to the left. And I heard JY's voice, this big loud voice coming out of the bar. And I thought, and I kind of could peek in through the glass, and I saw that they were all sitting there. And I thought, do I go in there or do I just slink off and go to my room? That would be the easier choice. Is my presence going to be a reminder that John died today and he's never coming back? Or, I said, what do I do? What do I do? And I thought, screw it. I walked into the bar, not knowing if I was going to have a murky reception or whatever. And as soon as they saw me, they said, "Oh, Todd, hey." And they pulled up a chair. And I think that was the moment that I had a seat literally at the table with the band. And I listened to them tell stories through, laughing, and they're crying about John and things that he did. And I think that was really the thing that solidified me in the band. You know, come to think of it, they never told me I have the job. I've just been kind of hanging around for 24 years.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that night was 24 years ago.
So something worked and something stuck.
Yes, I mean, obviously through John's misfortune, he was a really cool drummer, and from all reports, I never met the man, but from all reports I heard, he was one of the funniest guys anyone had ever met. So for me, it was like replacing a personality, probably like how Kenny Jones felt replacing Keith Moon. You're replacing this personality, and it goes beyond just playing the drums. There's this personality that's no longer there, and that was something I was always aware of, certainly on that first tour.
It feels very fitting for the kind of talent that you have, that you were able to step into this role and keep that previous music of the Styx alive and perform that for fans, but also be a huge role in moving them forward in the new music that followed.
Well, I mean, that had to happen. I mean, it was my job to help keep this in a forward motion and a forward momentum, and almost like putting a new engine under the hood, type of thing. That's how I looked at what I have to do, night after night, and supply a level of consistency that those guys have as musicians and performers, and I had to always match that and support that. And when it came time to doing new music in '99 and to 2003, and with the Mission, and I just recorded the what will be the next Styx record a couple of weeks ago, right there.
Oh, great. That's good to hear.
Things need to keep progressing.
Uh-huh.
That's the healthy way of going about it.
Definitely. So you have your solo work, you have the Styx, and then you kind of have these other careers as a session musician and an educator. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I always groomed myself to be a session musician, imagining the great days of, when sessions happened, multiple times a day for all the top guys. And that's what I started doing in Chicago in the early to mid '90s, or through about '97 when I moved to Los Angeles. And it was fantastic, to be in my early 20s and having drum sets being carted around the city, never knowing what I was going to be doing. That was a very exciting time. So it's very important that I keep my skills fresh, and I enjoy working on other music and playing with other people and doing other projects, especially when you've been in a band this long, because then I can go back to working with a band and it feels fresh. If that was the only thing that I ever did, I could see that becoming, or, you do anything for a long time, you run the risk of having the Groundhog Day effect,
Right.
So it helps keep me fresh, and I think it keeps my musicianship going in a forward motion. And the same thing with teaching. I learned to love teaching, because when you have to explain ideas that I might intrinsically understand, but to have to verbalize it and convey the notion to another person, that deepens my own understanding of what I'm talking about. So I kind of got into that, and then started formulating ideas and formulating ways to express things to other drummers and other musicians, through the Methods and Mechanics DVD series, through all the drum clinics, through the drum master classes, and the rock drumming master class from Drumeo, which was over 15 hours long of this, talking and playing. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I don't take myself seriously at all, but I take the passing on of information seriously, because I think if we have something to say, it's our duty to pass that on to the next generation.
Definitely. And I can't even begin to imagine what it means to a drummer. I'm not a drummer myself, but admiring you as an artist and a human being, it's such a privilege to hear from you and really hear your perspective on all this. So as an aspiring drummer, to get to learn from you it's something that so many artists don't share. And I think it's something that really makes you stand out, that you're willing to communicate that craft.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's just, I enjoy doing it. And if if it makes other drummers their journey more enjoyable, or a clearer yellow brick road for their path, then that's a great thing. What a great thing to help other people along their musical paths.
Definitely. So, what has fame meant to you, and how is it different with your solo work?
I'm just a guy who plays drums. I can't even I entertain the word fame because I can largely walk through the world unnoticed, and I like that. And I wouldn't want it any other way. Occasionally some drummer will recognize me, at baggage claim or on an airplane or something, and that's very sweet. But I would not use the word fame at all. I blush and I think it's silly. I'm just a guy who plays drums that, you know, I love doing this. And if people like what I do, then that's great. And let's keep doing it. You know, that's,
You
that's
actually
really, that's my thing.
you actually have a great story about blending in with a crowd as the early days drumming for Styx. Can you share that?
Yeah. I just posted that, just yesterday. You know, I've had a lot of time to think about things the last few months, and this memory came back to me. I was actually um, teaching a Zoom lesson to a guy in Canada the other day, and somehow this story came up, and I started thinking about it. I thought, gee, I should probably write that down. But my first Styx tour in '96, I was the new guy, and there were no photos of me in any of the press or any of the band publicity shots. It was really pre-internet, so I could walk around the venues totally unnoticed and walk around anonymously. And I, would like to hear, a little bit of Kansas, who was the opening band on that tour, from out front, and Keith Marks, who was our assistant tour manager at that time. He and I were already old friends at this point. He owned the cartage company that handled all the gear for the session musicians in Chicago. So he and I had worked together for years. And if there was some unused comps for a particular night, he would grab a pair, usually in the first 5 rows or sometimes second or first row. And he'd grab me and he'd say, "Hey, let's go for a walk." I'm like, "Oh, cool." So we'd go and we'd walk out and we'd go into the lawn of, the outdoor shed music venues. And we try to find, two people with Styx shirts, sitting on a blanket that just looked like they would freak out if they had awesome seats. And so we'd pick two and we'd go up to them and say, "Hey, we have a couple of tickets that we're not using. Do you guys want to have seats in the pavilion?" And they would look at each other and then look at us very suspiciously. "You're not using the tickets?" Like, "No, here, you want them, here you go." And we put them in their hand, and we kind of walk away and "Thanks." And they'd look, they didn't believe it. And so we would scurry away down to one of the far corners and start walking down towards the stage. And we would just watch them kind of stand up and discuss it and pick up their blanket, whatever they had, and walk down. And we just watched them pass each security check until they got to the first row, and they're high-fiving each other and jumping up and down and hugging each other. And it was such a great feeling. And then in the first song, I'd make eye contact with them and kind of give them like, "Hey, what's up? You guys having fun?" And their faces are like, "Oh, you were the dude. You were the dude." It was such a beautiful thing to be able to do that. And of course, by the next year, I couldn't, because people knew who I
Hmm.
was, and if I started walking out, it caused a scene, and I don't want scenes. I don't handle them very well, so that had to stop. But what a fun and beautiful thing that was to do, as many times as Keith and I did it. It was really great to just make someone explode with absolute euphoria and disbelief, like giving someone a golden ticket or something like that. It was really fun to do.
Totally. I can't even imagine what that meant to a fan then. It's very cool that you got to bring that to so many
It,
people.
it would have meant a lot to me if someone did that to me, of all the shows that I saw in the 65th row, you know?
Yeah, for real. Wow. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I love that story. It's so cool that you could tell that to us today.
Thanks for asking me. I love that story.
Here at Tower Records, we have something that we say that we've said for many years: no music, no life. What does that mean to you?
Well, I can't imagine life without music. And music is the human experience. I mean, music to me, it encapsulates every emotion: love, pain, grief, loss, exuberation. It's the human experience. So nothing mirrors the human experience quite like music. Nothing can make me laugh or cry quite like music. Um, I wouldn't want life without it, because it is life. That's a good slogan.
Thanks. Awesome. Well, congratulations on your new solo album, Last
Thank you.
Flight Home. We
Thank
love
you.
it. It's such a pleasure to talk to you, and I want to give you the last word if there's anything you would like to add.
Everybody stay safe. Stay safe. Do the right thing. Um, no storm lasts forever, but I think this is going to be a lot longer than any of us would like. So be safe and be kind and thoughtful to others. That's what we need right now. Kindness, thoughtfulness, and peace and love, I suppose.